Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central alongside Jeff McLane. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from the Lincoln Financial Field press box as we get set for the Eagles' Week 5 matchup against the Denver Broncos. Jeff, as always, it is great to see you. How you doing today?
I'm good, Olivia. Thanks for asking. Excited for another Eagles game. It's a beautiful day, maybe a little warm for early October, but Eagles have a chance here to win 11 straight, including the postseason, I think, which would set a franchise record, 13 straight at the Link. And, things haven't been exactly pretty or perfect in the first 4 games, but they're 4-0 and have an opportunity to finally put it together and maybe beat a very good, underrated, I think, Broncos team.
Underrated. Also a team that is coming off of a short week, having just played on Monday Night Football, and of course a long cross-country flight from Denver. So perhaps this is an advantage there for the Eagles. Well, we'll get into all of that in just a moment. Before we start, I just want to remind all of you out there, you can be a part of our conversation. Head on over, if you're not already there, to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Leave us a question or a comment if you're watching on X, Facebook, YouTube, wherever we are streaming live to on social media. You can also drop a question or a comment down in the chat, and we will get to some of those during our show today. All right, Jeff, you would think everything in Eagles land right now should be perfect. The team is 4-0. They are just one of two teams in the NFL that have a perfect record through the first 4 weeks of the season. However, there is always something going on in the Eagles world. There's not, everything is not perfect in terms of the way that this team is playing. Always things to be critical of. There's certainly a lot of good things that the team is doing right now. The Eagles have been really flawless situationally, almost perfect in the red zone. They're 100% in the red zone right now. They're playing good situational football for the most part on both sides of the ball. And the Eagles only have committed 1 turnover all season. So there's good things to say about this team. However, if we all want to nitpick too, there's also a lot of room for them to improve and to grow. The offense is second to last in total yards. The defense has been struggling, particularly against the run, allowing 4.8 yards per attempt, which is 26th in the league, a far cry from just how tight they were on the ground last year. When you look at this team, Jeff, right now, how concerned are you about how they've started? Are some of these issues, a sign that the Eagles just have some room to grow, or is it a sign of potentially bigger issues to come down the line?
Well, I think the Eagles are concerned, and I think that's what's most important. Not overly so when you're 4-0, and as you mentioned, there have been positive parts of the team on both sides of the ball. More so, I think, on the defensive side. I thought they played really well against the Bucs, despite kind of the yardage that they gave up. It was really just 2 big plays, breakdowns there. But other than that, just causing 2 turnovers in that second half. And if you really go back to the second half of the first game, it's really been a strong performance from Vic Fangio's unit. And coming into the season, there were a lot of questions about that side of the ball because the Eagles were replacing 5 starters, and for the most part, the guys that they've had in there have done a good job. It looks like there's probably going to be a permanent change at cornerback. We'll get to that in a little bit. But other than that, the other guys that have stepped up into those roles have done a solid job. And I thought Vic Fangio, look, there's been all this talk about the way the Eagles are playing, the record, and how this could be a redo of 2023. I don't think that's entirely fair because you just look at the defense, the personnel's better, the coach, the coordinator is better than the guys they had in there 2 years ago. But I think the bigger concern is on the offensive side, right? And when you return 10 of 11 starters, the expectation is that that should be a well-oiled machine. Now, we knew going into the season that teams were going to be focused on stopping Saquon Barkley. That's part of what's happened here so far. But the fact that the passing game really kind of hasn't got unlocked, and we're going to get into that soon. We know about all the drama there, the concern there that AJ Brown has voiced, and even when he didn't actually voice it, he just kind of social mediated it. Is that a verb?
We'll make it a verb.
Yeah. And that to me is, when you have 8 Pro Bowl players on that side of the ball, it shouldn't look this tough. It shouldn't be this tough. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out. But, last year, it took them some time to find their identity. It took them, 5 games, in fact, till they started kind of making those changes. And then eventually it just got better and better and better. And they were 2-2. So here they are 4-0, kind of not as bad as, I think it's worse this year than it was last year, but they do have time to figure this out.
one of the common themes that a lot of the players have brought up throughout this 4-game win streak is that it is so much better to learn when you're winning than it is when you're losing. So it could very easily be a much different, more difficult situation for the Eagles to be in right now. So they are certainly not ignoring the fact that it has not been easy going through these first 4 games of the season. However, they would rather learn this way than, losing in some of these games. You mentioned, Jeff, the AJ Brown situation. Of course, all eyes are going to be on him in today's game. You mentioned after that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, we did not hear from him in the locker room. You approached him in the locker room and he politely declined to talk. And then after the game, goes to social media and voices some of his frustrations in the form of a couple somewhat cryptic tweets. And then later in the week, kind of trying to clarify some of the details that he had out there, and was really trying to say that he wasn't specifically directing those frustrations to anyone, any individual in particular. He's just kind of generally frustrated about the state of the offense, as I'm sure a lot of fans are and a lot of his fellow teammates are. And simply at the end of the day, the production that AJ Brown had in a game against the Buccaneers, for example, when he had 2 receptions for 7 yards on 9 targets, with the majority of those targets coming in the second half, that is not a recipe for the Eagles' offensive success, really at all in any game, but especially not going forward. So when you look at where AJ is right now and how Kevin, and kind of especially this matchup going into today's game, going up against one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, the 2024 Defensive Player of the Year in Patrick Surtain, what can Kevin Patullo do to scheme some touches for AJ Brown?
Yeah, I think there's a strong chance that Surtain is going to follow AJ Brown. That's what he does. He's done it more than anybody the last few years. First to the Eagles, Quinyon Mitchell. So that doesn't mean he's going to match up against him on every snap, but there's going to be a lot of man coverage, and AJ thrives against man coverage, right? Always open, right? Even when he's covered. So, and that's kind of what the Eagles have to do a better job of, is just having Jalen Hurts trust his receiver. You would think he would. I mean, there was claims just not so long ago that they play buddy ball too much. So, there'll be rub routes, there'll be route concepts that'll to beat man coverage that they're going to try. But I think more than anything, it's just kind of like trusting AJ, getting him in circumstances where the ball, as long as it's placed in a way that he can go get it. Give him some early opportunities. I think that's going to happen here, but it's going to be difficult. Patrick Surtain is one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and this is also a very good defensive front. But you mentioned about AJ and his tweet, and I was the one who reported that it was directed at someone in the building, and I still stand by that. In fact, I'll double down on that. Because AJ, maybe I think he apologized for that. Just having talked to people in the building a little more and gotten a little more context on what is happening. I think he felt like that was the only way that his message could be heard to the person that he was delivering it to. And did he handle it the right way? No, but he's been around for a while now with the Eagles, and he's worked with these people for a while now, and specifically Jalen Hurts. I'm not going to say it was him, but more than likely it was. Let me just say that. And I think sometimes that does speak to where the relationship could be right now. That he'd have to go in that route to kind of reach him. That is a little bit of a concern to me. But that being said, they've had. They're not as close as they used to be, but that shouldn't matter when you get in between the lines. And it didn't matter last year, and they went and won a Super Bowl, even after what happened after the Panthers game, and then Brandon Graham coming out and saying they weren't friends anymore, and all the drama that was around that. It's a part of it, but it's not all of it, and you can still be good teammates and still be friends or have a good relationship and still be able to produce on the field. But you can't let that get in the way. And that's the area that I think people are concerned about a little bit inside the building.
Mm-hmm. That is the big concern. And it's interesting too, because I feel like professional athletes, just generally speaking, not the most relatable people in the world, given their physical gifts. But I think for a lot of people, this is kind of a relatable situation. You're not going to be best friends with everyone you work with. You don't have to be best friends with everyone you work with, but can you function well together in the workplace? And this is a test of that relationship, that working relationship between the two of them. So we'll see if they are
you
able
saying
to
we're not best
rebound.
friends?
That's not what I'm saying. That was not directed at you, Jeff.
All right. I was just wondering. I mean, geez. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
We don't have to air our beef out there. It's fine.
I'm gonna send you a cryptic message on Twitter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out on that. I've got your tweet notifications on, so I see everything that you put out there, Jeff. Don't worry. You're not gonna subtweet me without me knowing. You also mentioned just the formidable nature of this Browns defensive front. That is going to be a huge part of this game when the Eagles have the ball. I mean, it's just the fact that they have been able to generate so much pressure on opposing quarterback. They lead the league, according to Next Gen Stats, in pressure rate at 48.1%. And the two players really leading the charge are on the edges in Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper. Bonito really stands out. He leads the NFL with 11 quarterback hits this season. He's had at least 6 pressures in each of his first 4 games. Of course, not everyone in the league right now is Jordan Mailata, and that's who he is most likely to see most of this day as he lines up on the defensive right side. But when you look at just kind of the state of this Eagles offensive line, Jeff, this is a group that has been dealing with some injuries this season. Lane Johnson, notably, has dropped out of 2 games this season due to injury. Landon Dickerson underwent knee surgery during training camp, but he also has sustained a back injury the first week of the season leading up to that first game against the Dallas Cowboys. So you've got, a couple guys banged up on the line. You've got a new face in Tyler Steen at right guard. Who has the advantage in this matchup in the trenches?
Yeah, well, I asked Nick Sirianni about this week, especially the competition that's going to happen on the outside with Bonita and Cooper versus Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. And he said it was strength versus strength, which it is. And that's the Eagles tackles have still played very well. Lane, whenever he's been in there, obviously the injuries are a little bit of a concern. He hasn't been able to finish 2 games. Mailata has held up very well. Those 2 guys have, I think Cooper is first in terms of average get off, and Bonita is third or tied for second, something like that. These guys get off the ball quick. Now that is one of the strengths of Mailata and Lane. We've seen Lane first to move to the point where people think he false starts half the time, but he's quick off the snap, and he learned that from Jason Peters. So that should help the Eagles tackles against those 2 guys, but they're good, and because they're good, it's not like the Broncos need to do much to help them. Maybe the Eagles. I don't think Mailata and Johnson need much help. They're put on the island more than almost any other tackles in the league. But we'll see if they'll be chipping or coming from the tight ends and on some of the routes. But you do raise a good point about the offensive line. I mean, I think the bigger concern has been in the interior. Let's be honest, and it's probably all injury related to some extent. Landon coming off the knee and also having the back thing. And I just wonder, looking at Cam Jurgens, if he had off-season back surgery. We all know what he had to play through in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl showed a lot of strength and determination and guts. But I just wonder, he just looks like he's getting pushed back a little bit more. And that's been an issue in terms of the run game. That's been an issue in terms of guys, into walking Cam back into Jalen Hurts' lap. Tyler Steen, I thought, has played nicely in his first year as a full-time starter, not the run blocker that Mekhi Becton is. And now he's got a little bit of a knee issue. He left last week, did return, had a brace on, but you wonder if he's going to be 100%. So, that's an issue. And if you look at the Broncos, they have a good interior, and it's led by really good guys, a really good defensive tackle, defensive end. He plays, the 3, the 4, the 5 technique is Zach Allen. So that's going to be a matchup I'm going to watch out for whoever he's lining up over.
Mm-hmm. Let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. The Denver Broncos, we talked to Vic Fangio earlier this week, former head coach of the Broncos, and it was interesting. He compared Bo Nix to Baker Mayfield. He called him Baker Mayfield's younger brother, and I think the Eagles may not love to hear about that comparison simply because Baker Mayfield's a great quarterback. They saw a quarterback earlier this year who's also capable of extending plays just like Baker Mayfield is in Patrick Mahomes. So this is like the third kind of similar archetype of quarterback that they're going up against this year. Nix is capable of scrambling. He's good at extending plays, as I mentioned, and he also tends to force the ball into tight windows just like Baker Mayfield does. However, Nix has gotten himself in some trouble when he does that. It can be a detriment to his game. He's got 4 interceptions so far this season, including which is 4th in the league, which also includes the interception he threw last week against the the Bengals in the end zone. It's going to be an interesting day, especially in the trenches, as we already mentioned. But if you look at this matchup when the Broncos have the ball, this has been a really strong Broncos offensive line through the first 4 games of the season. They've only allowed 3 sacks, which is the best in the league so far. So when you look at all of the kind of strengths and weaknesses that Bo Nix has, what is the key to really getting him to lean into some of those weaknesses and trying to just contain him in today's game?
He will try and extend plays past this first read, which is there's positive there, right? Because he can make some plays with his legs or with his arm in terms of how he scrambles in the pocket. But then sometimes that's when he'll kind of force some of the throws that you talked about. I like Nix. I think I just like how he's not afraid to throw it into tight windows, and he's got a little bit of a gunslinger in him. And you got to make those throws in the NFL, quite frankly. Like last week in that game on Monday night, I just sat and watched it live just to get kind of a beat ahead on how he is performing at this point. He didn't have a really good start to the season, and early in that game, he threw an interception in the end zone. Not a very smart decision in that circumstance. But then the next drive just drives him right down and throws a great pass to Courtland Sutton. Tight window. Sutton had to make a good catch on it, but the ball was where it needed to be, and they scored a touchdown. So that tells me a lot about his mentality. If you look at the rest of the Broncos offense, that offensive line is what you want for a young quarterback because they do keep him protected for the most part. He's only been sacked 3 times, as you mentioned. I think, the left tackle, Garrett Bowles, hasn't allowed a sack all season. He's going to be a tough matchup for Alex Hunt, who is now kind of in that number 1 role with Nolan Smith injured. And, Hunt, it's, last week it was a Tristan Wirfs. Now it's Garrett Bowles. I mean, that's tough to keep, rushing against a guy just isn't letting you get close to the quarterback. And that's what we could see here. So it's going to fall on the other guys along that front. Now, the Eagles do have more strength in the interior. I think there's an opportunity there for Morajoma to capitalize on how he performed. He had his best game of the season last year. Jalen Carter has his shoulder issue, which I think it just isn't going away. But he has shown a lot of heart and keep playing. And then, in terms of the edge, Zadarius Smith, Vic Fangio said he thought he had his best game last week. Josh Uche had some good rushes. Azeez Ojulari could be active this game. I guess, do we know yet?
He is active. Yep.
He is active.
First time this season.
Yeah, first time this season. So, we'll see if he gets some opportunities in there. Maybe he's raring and ready to go. I guess we'll see. But it should be an interesting matchup up front for the Eagles.
I want to go back to something you said, Jeff. You mentioned Courtland Sutton and how trusty of a receiver he has been for Bo Nix this season. I'm curious to know, and I'm curious if you think if Quinyon Mitchell would potentially shadow him. Mitchell has stepped into this responsibility this year where he is traveling with some of these top receivers that he's gone up against. Most recently, we saw him spend a lot of time lined up across from Emeka Egbuka against the Bucs. And then the week before that, there was a lot of Devontae Adams versus Quinyon Mitchell as well. They've been a lot of very fun matchups to watch. Sutton is not quite the receiver that some of these big name guys have been, some of the matchups that Quinyon Mitchell has had. Still, regardless, do you expect him to match up against Sutton in today's game?
I think so. Like, I wouldn't say Sutton's obviously as good as some of the guys that he'll face and has faced, but I think there's definitely a little bit of a drop off from Sutton to the next few receivers, Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, who'll be more in the slot. So yeah, I think we'll see Mitchell follow him for part of the game.
One of the issues that the Broncos have had historically under Sean Payton is their run game just really hasn't been there. And now it seems like they are starting to turn the tide behind J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, who have been a really reliable duo for them on the ground this season. In fact, Dobbins became the team's first 100-yard rusher since 2023 with his 101-yard performance against the Bengals. This is an interesting matchup to watch simply because the Eagles' run defense has not really been up to their standard, in my opinion. Their numbers have not been very impressive. Fangio's group, they rank just 26th in the NFL in yards per attempt allowed at 4.8. Why do you think, Jeff, that this run defense really hasn't been as good as we have seen in recent years? Or excuse me, last year?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a mystery. I mean, I think the tackling hasn't been especially sound. That's part of it. Um, but they do have good tacklers on the team. Zach Bond's a good tackler. Cooper DeJean's a good tackler. I think maybe the defensive front, those guys sometimes aren't the greatest of tacklers. Um, Jalen Carter historically misses like a lot. He also is aggressive, so that offsets maybe what he lacks in terms of tackling. But Jordan Davis is supposed to be your linchpin in terms of the middle of that line, and as well as he's played to this point, as a pass rusher, he's improved. Maybe not as strong. It's a small sample. I do feel like this run defense will eventually come around. I thought they were much better against the Broncos than they had been in the previous week. I mean, the Rams ran it down their throats for a lot of that game, and that is a concern. And as you mentioned, J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, these are guys that are really good after contact. I think Harvey's second in the league among running backs that qualify in yards after contact, like 4.44 yards or something like that. And J.K. Dobbins is like 3.5, 3.6. He's like maybe 10th or something like that. So these guys are going to be hard to bring down. And it's really going to be upon the Zach Bonds, Jahad Campbell's, the Cooper DeJean at that second level to make the stops when they have the opportunity.
All right, Jeff, we've talked about a lot of players so far throughout our show. However, if there is one that you're really going to be focused on in today's game, who would it be?
Yeah, it's going to be Keely Ringo. From what I understand, he will start. And it seemed like it was going in that direction. Vic Fangio kind of gave us a heads up when Adoree was hurt that it would be Ringo last week, and it kind of again gave us the little bit of a heads up, and I think it makes sense. I think they want Adoree to be the guy because they have him under contract for 2 more years. Keely, they want Keely to be a guy because they have him under contract for 2 more years. Is someone that they've drafted and nurtured and brought along. That doesn't mean that you give him the job. You have to go out there and perform and do it. And I think for the most part, Keely acquitted himself last week as the starter, specifically as in coverage situations, which is what you want from that spot. Tackling was a little suspect, and that we've seen that over from time to time. That form tackling is something that gives him an issue, especially in the open field. I mean, remember the first preseason game when he totally whiffed on Jamar Chase, and everyone's like, "Oh boy, here we go." Keely isn't ready for the job, but to his credit, he didn't give up, and even when he dropped down the depth chart behind Jacorian Bennett, he kept plugging along. And look, what you want out of that position is someone who can cover receivers down the field, and I think Keely can do it. Is he going to give up stuff? Yeah, he's going to give up stuff. Is he going to make some sort of mental mistakes here and there? Yes, certainly. But he has the physical attributes, and I think Adoree at this point doesn't quite have them. Plays soft, and I think at times leaves the Eagles exposed. So we'll see how it plays out. But I'm interested to see how Keely does, because if Quinyon Mitchell is following Cortland Sutton, then we're going to see a lot of Keely on Marvin Mims Jr.
You think back to that big explosive play that Chase had against Keely Ringo, and I remember Vic Fangio talking about it, like that I believe the call was cover 0, just so he could like specifically test Keely Ringo in that situation. Of course, he did not rise to the occasion. However, you think back to this Bucs game last week, and I thought that yes, Keely Ringo had his share of missed tackles, but the defense also did a really good job of rallying around him to clean up some of those missed tackles. So the issues or like the pain, the damage inflicted was not as bad as it could have been. So perhaps Fangio can continue to put the defense in advantageous situations and try to cover up some of the deficiencies in the secondary, specifically as it relates to Ringo. But as you mentioned, he's going to get that opportunity. Adoree Jackson is active for today's game, so presumably he's healthy enough to back up, and we'll see how this shakes out. I'm going to have my eye on in today's game Saquon Barkley. We've talked about him so much throughout these first 4 weeks, but it continues to be the same story with the run game. It's just, of course, it was not going to be as good and as dominant as it was last season when Barkley rushed for over 2,000 yards in the regular season. But it hasn't even come close to that, especially on those inside runs between the tackles. We already discussed some of the issues that the interior offensive line is dealing with. I would think that some of those issues are what is impacting Barkley and his ability to pick up yards between the tackles. I think one of the biggest areas of concern that I have for Barkley and something that has been most glaring compared to his dominance dominance last season is just the yards he's been able to generate before contact. He, according to Next Gen Stats, he rushed for 829 rushing yards before contact in 2024. This year, he just has 40, which is pretty stark. So I think something that the blocking up front needs to change. They need to start to figure out what their identity is and the types of runs that work well for them. Teams are going to keep loading up the box against him to stop him. They need to figure out ways to make those defenses pay in other ways. So I will be curious to see how Kevin Patullo, puts his run game in a position to succeed or not in today's game. And as you mentioned, in addition to Barkley, I'm also really curious to see if Azeez Ojulari is given any sort of opportunity in today's game. As we mentioned, he is active for the first time this season. I mean, there's a chance that Vic Fangio never takes him off the sideline. There's a chance that he stays there the entire game. We know Fangio likes to, he does not mind just kind of rotating through a few edge rushers, and pretty much everyone else is active in today's game. So really interested to see if he does get an opportunity here and there to show, I don't know, something. We really didn't get to see a lot from him in training camp. He did not stand out for the most part. And we certainly haven't gotten to see any of him just through the regular season because he hasn't played. So he's someone I'm very intrigued by and interested to see if he is able to, A, even earn an opportunity in today's game, and B, if he does have any opportunities to make an impact. All right, Jeff, finally, we're taking out the crystal ball. I need to know, what is your prediction, your final score prediction for today's game?
Yeah, well, it's hard to pick against the Eagles. They just keep winning, despite not playing close to their best ball. You have to think, I guess, with the law of averages and the talent that they have, that maybe this will be the week. This could also be the week that they finally lose a game that they should have lost if they don't play up to snuff. My concerns about the pass offense remain, and I'm not sure if this is like the ideal game for them to cure what has ailed them through the first 4 weeks. That being said, I think Kevin Patullo has been okay. Creative in the red zone, 11-11. Last week had some really nice designs and calls in those in those situations. It's been almost everything else though that has kind of given me cause for concern. And I'm not trying to put it all on Kevin. You could sprinkle it around to everybody. When you watch the film, everybody has made bad plays in terms of execution. And then you could also certainly blame Nick Sirianni, who's in charge of all of it and has this conservative type of frame of mind when it comes to how he wants the game to be run, in terms of like no turnovers, don't give up, don't try to do too much because there is always that potential, but that has limited them in terms of the explosive plays game, and we just haven't seen that out of this offense, when typically that's what they've gotten. Saquon Barkley hasn't been able to break into the second level, and that's really kind of a big part of how effective he was last year. And this offense, they didn't get the explosive plays in the pass offense, they got it from the run offense. All right, well, anyway, I'm droning on and on about this game, because I do think it's one that certainly they can lose, and it's not the end of the world, right? 4-1, they're not going to win all 17 most likely. But that being said, it's just hard to pick against them. They just keep finding ways to win. I do think that AJ will be more involved. I do think that there'll be more opportunities for him down the field, or even against Surtain. But it could come down to a late score again. This is what we've seen the last 3 weeks for them. The last 4 games, the first 4 games for the most part. But I'm actually going to pick them to score some points here. I have the Eagles winning 30-23. And moving to 5-0 on a short week ahead of the Giants game at the Meadowlands.
All right, Jeff, here's the thing. I also have a lot of questions about this Eagles team. I also have a lot of questions about this Broncos team, too. You look at the 2 teams that the Broncos beat, or excuse me, the 2 opponents the 2 opponents they beat, they have a combined record of 2-6, and the 2 opponents they lost to have a combined record of 6-2. So I think it's probably, like, you look at just a very small sample size, they haven't beaten many good teams. And they also, if you also look at kind of how they won those games, and even in the games that they lost to, of course, they have yet to play behind in the fourth quarter. And if it is a game that is going to come down to the wire, like so many of these Eagles games have so far this season. As you and I both know, as we both try to file under deadline, it's like sometimes you're sitting there at the end of the game, like what just happened, because you had to rewrite all this stuff. But because these games there have been no easy wins for the Eagles. They've been, to their credit, able to grind it out and able to find a way. And the Broncos just haven't really been in that situation yet. So I don't know if we can expect them, just simply because they haven't done it yet, if that situation does roll around again in this game, if they're going to be the ones to pull off the big win, or to score on the whatever on the last drive of the game, like the Eagles have been able to muster in to start this season. So for that reason, I am picking the Eagles in this game, 28-22. As you mentioned, this is not exactly, I don't see this being like a get well game for the Eagles. This is going to be a really tough matchup against the Broncos. And this is not an easy defense specifically for this Eagles offense to get well against. However, I also have a lot of questions about the Broncos. And I think the Eagles' dominance, just their ability to continue to find ways, makes it so that it's really difficult to pick against them, as I know from when I picked against them just 2 weeks ago against the Rams, and they proved me wrong. So I'm going with the Eagles, as I said, 28-22. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching Inquirer live at Gameday Central. Just a reminder, again, head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. During the game, we will be over there throughout the game, chatting with you, answering your questions. So we look forward to seeing you over there in just a little bit.
And if you want even more Eagles insight, please check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with exclusive reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed about your favorite team. We now have day after episodes where I talk to one of my Inquirer colleagues about the previous day or night's game, and we'll have one tomorrow after this Eagles-Broncos game. So please listen to Uncovering the Birds at inquirer.com/podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Once again, that is all for us today. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.